Welcome to Music to Compose You, where the timeless melodies of classical music intertwine with narratives of personal transformation. Join me each week at my Steinway piano on a journey through the symphonies of life. We explore how the power of music shapes our stories, ignites our passions, and leads us towards profound inner growth and physical healing. From the gentle cascades of a Bach prelude to the triumphant crescendo of a Beethoven sonata, each episode will resonate with the melodies of our experiences, inviting you to discover the transformative magic of classical music. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Music to Compose You podcast. I'm Margaret Wacyk, and we are wrapping up the series on Beethoven, where for the last several weeks we have been walking our way through his gargantuan, epic sonata, Opus 57, known as the Appassionata. It is passionate. It is filled with so much turbulence and emotion because it describes situations which we all face in life, which is the storm. And today we are going to be looking at the second movement, which is an oasis of calm in the storm. And as usual, I like to relate these great pieces that we are listening to and studying to life events and the philosophical and spiritual themes that are in each of our lives, because music has a way to enhance the emotions and to bring us together in this universal language, because especially in this time where everything is so divided, it seems, I feel like things that harmonize us, that bring us together, that we can all understand and appreciate and share, have a great significance. So I hope you agree. And with that, let's dive into the theme today. And it'll start with a question, which is, how will you handle the storm when it comes in your life? Perhaps you have already been in a storm or coming out of a storm. Maybe it's, a health crisis or a relationship breakdown, issues in your job, or aging parents and the struggle to be a caretaker. Whatever is the particular storm in your life, we all get them. And it seems that life is a collection of experiences to try to bring us closer to the truth. And what is the truth? Well, some people believe that the truth is love. I do find that to be a compelling theme. And so the truth of the fact that every single experience we have is bringing us closer to unity, to knowing that we are not separated from, if you will, a divine force, the collective that we all are. We are all part of a bigger picture. So with that, let's take a look at the second movement. Now, last week we concluded with the first movement of the Appassionata. Dramatic, epic, terse, turbulent. And as the movement ended, it did not leave us feeling any resolution. In fact, it was just as terse and just as tremulous as it was in the beginning. There were tremors of doubt, there were tremors of fear. And now, as we enter the second movement, we get a completely different feeling. It is a oasis of calm and peace. And it's a little bit like the eye of the storm. When you see the eye of a hurricane, it's that almost crystal clear blue that you can't even believe that there could be such a little pocket of peace, and yet surrounding that eye you have those thunderous dark clouds. It could feel like life sometimes, like we're surrounded on all sides by stress and problems and tensions and issues, and yet we're seeking that calm in the middle of the storm. So let's take a look or listen at the beginning of this beautiful, serene second movement. It's a chorale. It's like a choir singing. And whenever we have a setting like this, there is an angelic peace that is inferred in this. It's also in the key of D flat. D flat is, I feel, a divine key. Whenever Beethoven, especially in this piece, takes us to D flat, and even in the first movement, we did have, towards the end, a moment in that key where we felt it sounded like sparkles. It sounded like some crystalline world of peace. A respite in the darkness of the storm. And here we are in the second movement. And again, we have this clear blue sky. When I play this piece, I relate it in my mind, and I always think about a story from the Bible, Jesus calming the sea. And so the story is that Jesus is with his disciples on a boat, and they're in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, and the trip starts out smoothly. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, these dark clouds come and a torrential storm hits. And suddenly the waves start pounding the boat, and they're taller than the boat. It seems like they're going to capsize. And you have the disciples all freaking out, essentially. There's some trying to do the best they can to repair the boat, those that know about boats, and there's some others that are just, yelling for Jesus, like, Jesus, where are you? You're supposed to be helping us here. But where is Jesus? He's asleep. They find him at the other side of the boat, sleeping on a cushion, unbothered. And they ask him, finally, there's like, Jesus, there's a storm. Aren't you going to do anything? Aren't you going to help us? And then at last, Jesus speaks to the waves, speaks to the seas, and tells it to quiet down. And then everybody is asking, like, amazed that even the waves and all of nature obeys. So there is an interesting depiction of this scene from the artist Rembrandt. And he painted this painting in 1633 when he was only 29 years old. And I put a picture of it here. And as you go close up in, you see that the 12 disciples are all doing something different in this moment of the storm. Of course, we have the ones that are trying to hold on to the sails, repair what they can, or keep the boat together whatever way they can. You have some others that are outright getting sick and they're halfway outside the boat. They're leaning over the boat sick. There's some that are clinging on, for all they've got because they're hanging off the ship. You have some even, it looks like, yelling at Jesus, saying, what is going on? Aren't you going to help us? And yet there's a 13th person on this boat. And that person is the only one who is actually sitting calmly and praying. He's in a state of rest and peace. And it's such an interesting painting because when life storms hit and we all go through these times of stress, how can we keep in that state of perfect peace? Well, for that, I am going to ask you two things. First of all, if you had to think of a character that you are in this painting, which one would it be? Would it be the one trying to fix things? Would it be the one like grasping on for dear life, holding on and fearing the worst? Would the character be the one that is unable to cope and getting sick? Would it be the one that is actually taking the road of least resistance and just trying to stay at peace and rest? Obviously, we all want to be that last character. But as we start off this discussion, I think it's pretty interesting to name which one you would be in that picture. I definitely would try to be the person that tries to fix things. I am a big, I'll fix it person. You got a problem? Don't worry, I'll take care of it. But that's often exhausted me. That's often brought me a lot of disappointment. That's often led me to question my motives. Like, what am I really doing that for? Is it for that person, or is it to feel important and needed by that person? Important distinction, which I've had to learn the hard way. So in any case, that's question one. And question number two, if indeed you are trying hard to keep that peace in the midst of stressful circumstances in life, what are your strategies for doing that? Today, I'd like to share 3 tips that help us to keep our mind at peace whenever we are hitting these stressful storms of life. So I'd like to first show this video about coherence, and it's from a website called Heart Math, and it has to do with heart coherence. I think the subject is so fascinating because scientists have found that we actually have another brain. Other than the one in our head, we have a heart brain, and it's known as the enteric nervous system. And it's an interesting story how they found this out. It turns out that there was somebody who got a heart transplant to save their life. And everything was going fine, but the patient said that they would have these reoccurring nightmares where they were thrown through a glass windshield and there was glass all over, and they couldn't explain why. They never had dreams like this before, and suddenly they were having them. And it turns out that the heart donor died by having a car accident, and being thrown through the windshield was one of her final memories. So it's so incredible because it shows that the heart actually imprints memory on it. It's also known that our heart is so powerful that it relays 8 times the amount of information to our brain than the brain relays to our heart. Astonishing. So it's a superpower. It also is the seat of our intuition. That feeling when you just have we call it like a gut feeling or a powerful feedback about something and you don't know quite where that intuition is coming from you, but you're getting a direct feeling that something is either right or not so right for you to do, that comes from your enteric nervous system and this heart brain. So let's take a look at this clip from heartmath.com.
We did an experiment here at HeartMath to study how the information flows between the heart and the brain. And we actually discovered something quite remarkable, something that surprised us. The participants in the study were connected to various sensors to measure their brain waves, their heartbeats, and so on. And then they were exposed to various images. Some were high arousal, like a car crash or a snake striking, while others were low arousal images, like bunny rabbits and nature scenes. The participants were asked to push a button. They then saw a blank computer screen for 6 seconds. The computer then randomly selected one of these photographs that it displayed for 3 seconds. After that, the screen went blank for 10 seconds. Now they were prompted to push the button again, and they repeated this protocol about 30 times. When we analyzed all the data, the results were astounding. The heart seemed to know the images before the participants ever saw the images with their eyes. If the future picture was going to be one of the emotionally arousing ones, the heart rate started to drop about 5 seconds before the image was randomly selected to be shown on the screen. So nobody could know what this future picture was going to be. The heart had a much greater deacceleration than if it was going to be a calm picture. These results have since been replicated in many different independent labs around the world, actually. Well, a lot of people say that I don't feel it in my heart, I feel it in my gut. But here's what's really happening. The information comes to the heart first. The heart then sends a different signal to the brain, which we can measure. Then you have a brain response, and then a body response. And with the body response, like the feeling in the gut or the hair on the back of the neck, is where it becomes conscious. But the real flow of information is heart, brain, body. And this is all happening many seconds before the actual event occurs. So what this body of research is telling us is that the heart seems to be connected to a type of intuition that is not bound by the limits of time and space. But what is that source of intuition? What is the heart connected to? And how can we learn to tap into more of that?
I think it's so interesting, this idea of coherence. It's so much like music and harmony, because whenever we hear a note, we're hearing beautiful waves, curved waves, like in an ocean, for instance. Those waves, has a peak and a trough, and they're curved and they're beautiful. They are beautiful. But when we hear noise, it's not like that at all. It's jagged, it's erratic. It's the difference between noise, which is unorganized, erratic, chaotic, and signal, sound, music, which is organized and periodic. And so we can easily harmonize, well, not so easily depending on our circumstances, but it is possible to harmonize our 3 most important centers, which is our heart with our brain and our emotions, and to get all of those waves to harmonize together. It's almost like this second movement. Like I said, it's a chorale, it's a choir singing, and you have voices, like the top voice, the middle voice, the bottom note, the bottom voice. So they're individual, like the heart, the emotions, the brain. And they do their own thing. They have their own roles, their own functions, but when they move in a harmony, in a coherence, in a way that magnifies both their individuality and their sense of togetherness. So we can work on that. One of the ways we can do that is, number one, go into gratitude. When things are falling apart, when there is so much stress and there is so much anxiety and tension, fighting, then it's important, no matter the situation, to try to find at least one thing to be grateful for. For instance, I was having a conversation recently, and the topic was a job that this person had that was extremely stressful because there was a lot of infighting in the office and a lot of toxicity. And so I asked the question, so how do you deal with it if day in and day out you have to go into that toxic environment and try to do your job, but at the same time deal with all of these forces? And so to that, my friend replied, I try to focus on being grateful, to be grateful for this beautiful office space that I get to be in, to be grateful for the job that I get to do, the security of that, to be grateful for the fact that I see the sun coming through my window, and try to refocus my mind on those things. And I thought that was just so beautiful, a reminder that we actually have the power in any circumstance. Perhaps we can't change the circumstance, but we can change the way we think about that circumstance. So the power of going into gratitude. Gratitude is one of the most high frequency emotions we have. I might have said it on this podcast, but if not, I'll say it again. When we go into the high frequencies, like in the piano, that's the highest frequency we have. But if this piano could be extended another mile or so, and those notes get higher and higher and higher, their frequency would get so high that it would cease to exist as sound and it start to be light. That's the power of high frequency. We need high frequency in our life, especially nowadays, guys, because we are surrounded by a lot of noise bites, a lot of media pollution, so much sound pollution. And I know we're talking a lot about, different types of toxicities, right? Like toxicities in our food, in our water, toxicity in our environment. But in the sound realm, in our soundscape, we also have a lot of toxicities we have to manage and be aware of. Sound is the silent killer. Oops, did I say that? Yes, I did. Sound is the silent killer. We can actually go, conversely, down the piano, lower and lower frequencies. And if that lower frequency range of the piano was to be extended so that it kept getting lower and lower and lower, eventually we would hit a sound that would stop everybody's hearts. No joke. We would all die. Crazy, right? But that's the power of sound. And that's why I say sound is the silent killer, because we hear sound all around us and we don't often take notice how it's affecting us. I was sitting at the movie theater recently, and there were these surround sound speakers, and I went into the theater in a great mood, and suddenly during the film, I got so agitated, and I couldn't tell why, but it was like I could feel my body get tight. I could feel my throat get tight. The whole thing, I just felt like I was being, I don't know, just attacked by some weird sounds. And when I stopped to listen to what was coming out of those speakers, there were like some weird sound effects, like it was like, I don't even know what was happening there, but they were definitely like pumping stuff in, I guess, to enhance, or not enhance, but to drive home this drama that was happening in the film. But gosh, it was so creepy. And I was messed up for the rest of the night. So I don't know. I'm putting it out there. Tell me if I'm crazy or if you guys have experienced this too. Do you ever go somewhere, you're in a good mood, and then suddenly you hear something, and I'm not even talking about a piece of bad news, like, somebody tells you about some, oh, did you hear that John died? No, I'm talking about like just out of the blue, you'll hear something and it's a sound and it is so creeping out. Well, it's a sign to just be on alert because these sounds are everywhere and we need to gird ourselves up with high frequencies each and every day. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, what's another thing we can do is, okay, change the frequency that you're tuning into. Okay, so that kind of goes with number one, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper here with this second one. So think of your sound space. Like imagine a bubble around you, okay? And in this bubble, you have obviously air, but just like a radio has different channels, and you can tune into any channel. You could tune into the hard rock channel, you could tune into the news channel, you could talk radio channel, you could tune into easy listening channel, jazz channel, 80s, pop, whatever you want. Okay, you get to choose. Okay, so that's the beauty of when you had these dials and you can choose which radio station you got to pick. Like you had like full gamut to choose and to pick, because you would have to like go through these like different frequencies, and when you wouldn't connect it would go like, again, this was kind of like cool mechanical stuff at those days when you had a dial. I love dials. What happened to dials? Everything now is a button you press, but in those days you had dials. So anyway, you can dial in the frequency that you're hearing at any time. And that has not just to do with whatever is outside you, but internally. Dial into a channel, into a frequency inside you that is going to make you feel good. I'll tell you, this morning, I decided to do an experiment. It kind of goes along with this theme. I'm going to insert it here. It's kind of crazy, but for some reason, I woke up and I was thinking about crickets. Yeah, crickets. This time of year, I don't know. This year, I think we're supposed to get the cicadas. And I've been hearing a lot of crickets outside. And so I was thinking about when I was around 18 years old, I went to a piano concert in Carramore, which is in Westchester. It's an outdoor summer music festival. And I was hearing this pianist who's still very well known and playing extensively, I think, Andreas Schiff. And he was playing some Bach outdoors. And I'll never forget, I was like so eager to hear this concert. And he's playing, it's live, everything's great. And then suddenly he stops. And he starts saying something. And nobody could really make out what he was saying. But then I like leaned in a little bit more. I was like, what is he saying? He kept saying the word crickets, crickets. And I thought, crickets? And so what he was getting at was that he would have to stop the concert, pause, because the crickets were making too much sound. And it was sort of competing with his music. I thought that was so crazy. But in any case, it was the crickets. So I then remembered that crickets, I once heard on YouTube something where they slowed down the sound of crickets, and what emerged was like mind-blowing. I was so impressed by this, but then I heard it might be a hoax. And so this morning, for some reason, thinking about the cicadas, thinking about that story about the crickets, I said to myself, what would happen if I take the sound of crickets and slow it down on my software? Because I have so much audio software. I've been doing audio editing and engineering for years and years and years. So I've never tried it, but why don't I do it? to either prove or disprove that. And oh my gosh, I have to show you what happened. So I'm going to insert that clip here. Guys, I want to show you something so cool. So I took a recording of crickets and I slowed down that recording from a lot. And this is what I heard. It sounded like a choir of angels. I couldn't help but think of the scripture that says that all of nature is giving praise to God. There are so many secret sounds out there. Crickets sometimes feel annoying at night if you're trying to sleep, but just think of the beautiful songs that they're giving, high frequency, love energy, and I hope they bring you a lot of happiness today. Anyway, so the whole point of this whole cricket story is that when we tune in to our inner frequency, we might be surprised that there is so much more beauty than what we hear on the outside. Just like those crickets, we hear the sound of crickets, we take it for granted. But do we know that inside those cricket sounds is a whole angelic choir? What are they singing? Like, how much joy are they actually portraying through those sounds that we are not even aware of? And so, conversely, how much joy is available inside you that you might be missing out on unless you tap in to that wealth of beauty and song that exists within you? Okay? I'm just going to let that sit there for a while because I know that might take a little time to kind of let that, soak in. But yes, there is music inside you. There is music in every organ in your body, but beyond that, there's the music of love in your DNA. Did you know that if you were to take your own DNA and flatten it out, it would be a musical encoding? It would actually have encoding very similar to melodies, and each person has a different melody. How beautiful is that? So, okay, so that's number 2. Change the channel you tune into on the inside. And lastly, number 3, find your higher self in that bandwidth. So again, like we just said, there is so much more wealth inside to explore these unknown groanings and sounds. And by the way, for those that are biblically inclined, there is a scripture that says that in order to pray, that we pray with groanings. So we're not even aware of, like, the groanings express so much more than words can portray. When we actually make sounds, even if they're not singing sounds, but like actual murmurs, sighs, groans, really from the heart, then we are connecting to divine source in a very powerfully potent way. So on this bandwidth of the higher self, a lot of times we think God is, or the divine is somewhere outside of us. We want to attain that sense of peace. We want to get into that eye of the storm, that crystalline blue, that gorgeous serenity, that bliss. But we feel like it's so far outside of us. What if we reframe this and realize that it's actually inside us, embedded within us? Just like this demonstration at the piano, it's always so interesting to do this. I want to show you, and I want to relate it to this idea that the goodness, the bliss is not somewhere outside. It's within us. The same way that I'm going to show you with sound. So this is a note C. Okay? So within that C, it's not just a note C. on its own. It's actually got a composite of many other notes within it. Like, for instance, this one and this one and this one and this one. Really? Let's listen again. You might find that hard to hear, but let me pull those notes out. What I'm going to do is I'm holding these notes down very quietly, like silently. You don't hear any sound right now. I wish I could reach this one too. Okay, I kind of did. All right, so I'm holding down the higher C, a G, a C, and another E. And now what I'm going to do is play middle C, and we're going to hear what happens. I'll do that again. Did you hear all these notes come into vibration? They are activated because they resonate, they vibrate because they are pulled into action. They're revealed when I play this C. This middle C reveals that all of these notes are inside of it. The same way, I want to use this as a metaphor, as an analogy, that this experiment reveals that the divine is actually inside of you, the same way that these high notes are inside that middle C. So when you realize it and you connect to it and really believe and shut off the voices that are negative, the voices that are judging, the voices that are critical and self-sabotaging, and you go into that higher voice, the one that is unconditionally loving you because it's the divine voice in you, then you can beat those dark storms and get through in a way that offers more peace. Phew. So that was quite a bit to unpack. So just to sum it up, and then we will hear this beautiful slow movement of Beethoven. Just to sum up, this idea of peace within the storm. As Beethoven writes, next week we're going to get into the last movement, and spoiler alert, it's the storm again. So we have this tiny little diamond in the middle of this piece. It's our oasis, and that's the second movement that we are examining today. And with that, the question of how can you and I stay in peace when the storms of life break all around us. And lastly, I shared the 3 strategies to keep your heart and mind and body in peace as you navigate those storms. And some of them were to, number 1, shift into gratitude, always finding something to be grateful for, no matter how difficult the circumstance. Number 2, changing, like imagining your bubble that you're in, this bubble of air, and that it's like a radio and you can tune in to any channel you want. You get to choose, and that channel is inside you. And lastly, to find your higher self in that internal frequency bandwidth that we all carry. We have to look for that, and it's sometimes drowned out by those critical voices, the judging voices, the negative voices, the self-sabotaging voices that we all have. And on one episode coming up, we're going to deal with those a little bit more. But in the meantime, to know that that divine voice is there for you to lean into as long as you can believe and match your frequency with it. So with that said, I invite you to stay tuned to the next episode as we conclude our series on the Beethoven Appassionata Sonata. And here is the middle movement. Take 2 symphonies and call me in the morning. Those are the words expressed by Elena Manis in her book, The Power of Music. My friend, let me ask you a question. Have you been using the power of music in your health and wellness journey? If not, then there's no better time than now to jump in. Because we live in a modern time that is filled with noise, where finding peace and clarity can sometimes seem impossible. However, by tapping into the notes of classical music and the timeless messages of wisdom found within, we have a powerful transformational tool that we can use today. But you might be thinking, well, classical music has never been my thing. How do I connect to it? How do I listen and actually like it, engage with it, and have it be a reflection of my feelings and emotions? Welcome to the Music to Compose You podcast. Here we connect the dots, bringing together the beautiful masterpieces of classical music, the stories behind the compositions, and the composers that wrote them. The benefits of classical music are sky high. From reducing stress and anxiety to boosting concentration and creativity, classical music harmonizes your mind and body, elevating your everyday experiences. And you can try it right now. Feel the soothing melodies wash over you, improving your mood, enhancing your cognitive abilities, and promoting restful sleep. Let the melodies of Mozart, Beethoven, and Bach be your companions on a journey to wellness. Download Sound Sleep, a collection of soothing piano masterpieces that soothe your nervous system and harmonizes the brain, creating an atmosphere of peace just perfect for bedtime. Try it by going to musictocomposeyou.com, and while you're there, be sure to join the newsletter where I share the latest behind-the-scenes footage of the podcast and access to special events, concerts, and goodies reserved just for subscribers. So thanks so much for being part of the Music to Compose You family. We are embarking on a fun journey. I'm so happy you're here for the ride. Let's let our soul song sing and see what this music reveals to us about ourselves.